All right, welcome back to SouFLoTV again, everybody. It is your host with the most. I have been requested to speak on this topic. What do I think? SouFlo, what do you think about Secretary of State, United States of America, Secretary of State Marco Rubio going to visit Jamaica? What do you think his intentions are, given the fact that most recently, prior to this visit, he made it very clear his stance on Caribbean islands and their elected officials, their public officials who continue to support the Cuban medical program using Cuban doctors and nurses in their countries. The threat was that they and their closest family members would lose their U.S. visas. So, some of these Caribbean islands have made it clear that we don't give a damn about a U.S. visa. You can take it. The Cubans mean too much to us, and we've been working with them for a long time. We've gotten through some tough things, and we would not have been able to do it without them. So you asking us to turn our backs on them to please you is not going to happen. And furthermore, we must put the health of our citizens first, not the interest of the United States of America over the health of our citizens. Some nations in the Caribbean have said that. Others have not. So, Jamaica has not responded directly yet. So now we will find out. Many people are of the impression that Marco Rubio is heading to Jamaica to soften the Prime Minister of Jamaica up, to lay his laws on the table, to have his way, if you will. And many Jamaicans are saying Andrew Holness will definitely be bowing down to Marco Rubio. Say goodbye to the Cubans, because Andrew does not have a bone in his body when it comes to these types of things. Now, these are all things that are out there that are being said. None of this is what has been said by me, the host, SouFLoTV. I can give you information as to what is out there. Right now, I am on the state government site, and Marco Rubio's visit is laid out. The reason for his visit: it's an intricate part of the community that the secretary comes from, obviously something we've been dealing with for a long time, and look to work with our Caribbean neighbors in handling that particular challenge in regards. The challenge, obviously, he said, is Haiti. And obviously, we all know that we shared a deep commitment to tackling this challenge in Haiti. In so doing, obviously, the trip was very thematically put together to be able to address some of these challenges. The first stop on this trip will be Jamaica. So, the first stop on the trip is obviously going to be Jamaica. Jamaica is probably, this is in their words, so please pay attention. Jamaica is probably our most like-minded partner in the Caribbean, is what was said. Also, a huge opportunity in regards to not only the commercial shipping lanes that go through Jamaica, which is obviously key to our security and our maritime security and our commercial shipping lane security, but also as regards to narcotics trafficking. So obviously, in combating these transnational criminal organizations is very key in Jamaica. And the partnership with Jamaica there has been extraordinary, but also arms trafficking, guns, and arms trafficking to Haiti, which is exacerbated, obviously, which is what feeds the gang violence in Haiti. So Jamaica is a key partner from a security perspective in regards to dealing with counter narcotics, in regards to dealing with arms trafficking, and in deepening that coordination will help not only improve the security and the safety of America, but also in dealing with this shared challenge that we have in Haiti. From a commercial side as well, Jamaica being a key partner in so maintaining those maritime routes that come, the routes that come from obviously the Panama Canal, but also in the upward flows that come through the region. We want to strengthen that. Obviously, this has been a discussion with Jamaica for a long time. The government, Prime Minister Andrew Holness, has been a great ally, has made great strides in dealing with the issue of crime in Jamaica. Obviously, the economic fiscal management of Jamaica has been one of the bright spots, not only in the Caribbean, but in the entire region in that regards, and helping them deal with that criminality, etc., is going to increase as well the opportunities and the development of perhaps one of our greatest allies in the Caribbean, there in Jamaica. I like how they said that Andrew Holness has made great strides in dealing with the issues of crime in Jamaica. As a Jamaican, I don't buy that. And I don't see what Jamaican would. Because I just did a live video where we crunched the numbers. We looked at the statistics. We looked at the numbers from 2009 to 2024 and into 2025 so far. Jamaica has steadily done over 1,000 murders comfortably under the Andrew Holness administration. The numbers have not changed much. The murders have been pretty much the same. Some years it spiked way up to 1,600 plus. Some years 15, some years 14, some years 13, some years 11. However, it has not broken the 1,000 mark and gotten below 1,000 at no time under the Andrew Holness administration. If you ask Jamaicans what's the most pressing issue for them, it's murders. Not crime as in pickpocket, house breaking, robberies, carjacking, stealing, but murders. Jamaicans can deal with the rest. The average Jamaican citizen can deal with the rest. But the murders is what's most pressing and most concerning. Now, statistics have proven, these aren't my words, that about 90% of the murders committed in Jamaica annually are committed using a gun, guns and bullets. And these guns and these ammunition, bullets, are coming from and are being manufactured by the United States of America. So, for them to say Jamaica is the most like-minded partner in the Caribbean compared to the US, and that Andrew Holness has done and great strides in dealing with criminality in the island of Jamaica, this softens the ground up for a lot more to come. Now, you see, I'll continue to read this material as it is posted at this .gov site, the state.gov site. They went on to say this: They went on to say that we'll also meet, we'll also meet with Barbados. Barbados currently heads CARICOM. So that's where those kind of joint topics and issues of energy security in Haiti is a great opportunity to meet that, even though we're deeply committed to the bilateral relationship with each of these Caribbean nations. Mind you, they said in Haiti to ensure that the Haitian political or the Haitian National Police and the provisional government have the support that they need in order to be able to tackle the violence of these gangs, which at the end of the day is important for the security, not only for the United States of America, but for the entire Caribbean. While they're in Jamaica, the secretary is also going to meet with and will also have bilateral conversations with Haiti and Haitian leaders as well. Now, they said they will also, while Marco Rubio is there in Jamaica, he'll be reaching out to Haiti, he'll be reaching out to other Caribbean islands, he'll be reaching out to Barbados. They noted that Barbados currently heads CARICOM, and that this is where those joint topics and issues of energy security in Haiti is a great opportunity to meet that, even though they're deeply committed to the bilateral relationship with each of the Caribbean nations. There's a dozen, and it's a lot of work. But we're deeply committed to the bilateral relationship with each of these islands, but we look forward to, with the leadership of Barbados and CARICOM, working on some of these broader, cohesive issues. The leader of Barbados had already made it clear how they feel concerning the relationship with Cuba and the Cuban medical program. Now they move on to Haiti, and they said, and in Haiti, which has been an energy leader in the region, obviously it is going through its own development. This is Trinidad, as it seeks to revitalize its natural gas opportunities, and it's going through that modernization as some of the older fields and opportunities there dry up. And they're looking for the new ones. There, along with a lot of the challenges that were posed with Venezuela, we're deeply committed to working with Trinidad to figuring out how to re-energize those natural gas opportunities, and ensure that its economy continues to move forward despite the challenges presented with Venezuela and otherwise. From there, the secretary, which is Marco Rubio, will go to Guyana. Guyana is poised this year to become the largest per capita oil producer in the world. Only first two is going to surpass Qatar and Kuwait. I don't know if you all know this. Again, from there, Jamaica, he will go to Guyana. Guyana is poised this year to become the largest per capita oil producer in the world. What is his visit for, you might say? First two is going to surpass Qatar and Kuwait. Damn. This is a huge kind of like a story of the last 5 years. I mean, it's probably one of the greatest stories of the last 5 years. Guyana now has a lot of talk. Guyana can say F them and don't send those planes with those deportees back here because you had them over there, keep them. Guyana actually turned around a plane of deportees from the UK. See, when you have natural resources, which translates to real wealth, you can talk. Now, this is a huge kind of story, is what they're saying. And I mean, they labeled it kind of like one of the biggest stories in the last 5 years, where Guyana sits with this oil discovery. It's seen as one of the greatest offshore opportunities in the world. This is them talking, y'all. SouFLoTV is telling you that I am reading from their documents. The security of Guyana is a key priority for us in the same way that we have been working with countries in the Gulf states to ensure the security cooperation from the regional threats there, Iran, etc. We want to work with Guyana in order to ensure the security cooperation there and its guarantees on its security. We've seen the threats from Venezuela. We've seen the approaches towards Exxon facilities. Obviously, that's unacceptable. And we want to work together to ensure binding and find an agreement towards binding security cooperations. That sounds like Venezuela is moving into Guyana's oil fields or threatening to take a part of it. Venezuela is no friend of the United States of America. So the United States of America, seeing that Guyana is about to become the number one oil producer per capita in the world, and in the next 2 years will outdo Iran and Qatar, the US is inserting itself to say, hey, let us be your security force to help you to keep Venezuela away from your massive amount of oil. I'll leave the comments for you to put in the comment section below. That's a win-win for both Guyana and the United. I'm back to reading their documents. That is a win-win for both Guyana and the United States. And I think that's going to be a big part of Secretary Marco Rubio's conversation while he is there. Remember, he's going to Jamaica. While he's in Jamaica, he'll be having conversations with Trinidad and Haiti's leaders. And then he will leave Jamaica and go to Guyana. The fact that these oil developments, and perhaps as has been described as the greatest offshore opportunities in the world today, and with an administration that doesn't punish countries for that development, we saw in the previous administration, in the Biden administration, that countries like Guyana were asked to almost halt or stop their development and progress in favor of renewables. No, we want to see Guyana succeed. We want to see it develop. We believe renewables are complementary in that regard and are not a substitute. So we want to support Guyana in this development, but protect it also from the threats that are being posed. And from there, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will then make a short stop in Suriname, which is shortly behind Guyana in regards to that huge opportunity in its energy development. Again, together with Guyana and Suriname, and obviously the history of Trinidad with natural gas, this is an opportunity that countries from the CARICOM community from that region are going to be able to support each other, to be able to create an energy security framework, which has already changed the geopolitics of the region. If we think back to the first Trump administration, we were dealing with the charges of PetroCarib, with the challenges of the corruption, the endemic corruption that PetroCarib and Venezuela were bringing to the islands of the region, the extortion that they were bringing to the region. The fact that now their own countries, Guyana, Suriname, are able to have and really surpass Venezuela in its own oil production and be able to work with its neighbors there in that region, that is a huge opportunity for the Caribbean, along with natural gas, microgrids, etc., to really finally try to put an end to that huge Achilles heel to its economic development and security. That's the goal. That's the priority. And that'll be where a lot of our conversations will be focused, and the Secretary's conversation will be focused during this trip. So, this right here gives you kind of an idea of where this is going to go, right? There was a question that was asked, and the question in the meeting they had was, "Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for this meeting. I appreciate it. Mauricio, can you talk a little bit more about whether any of the Caribbean nations have offered a formal response to the Cuban doctor's situation, and whether that's going to be on the agenda?" Will Marco Rubio be traveling there to confront them about that? Basically, is what that question says. Mr. Claver Caron said, "I'm sure that that's going to be on the agenda. Obviously, they'll raise it holistically." Look, we've been very clear. The United States stands firmly against human trafficking. The Trump administration and President Trump have been a leader in the fight against human trafficking, whether it's across the border with Mexico and what we saw, obviously, from the previous administration with 500,000 children and others that are being trafficked across the border, to white robe human trafficking by the totalitarian regime in Cuba of doctors that essentially are being trafficked across the world. Wow. So, for those of you who are listening, I am reading their documents. It's not just the Caribbean. Obviously, the Caribbean has really made this. It's an important issue because they're present in the Caribbean. It's historic and it's prolonged. But at the end of the day, that has been trafficked throughout the world in violation of international labor organizations, accords of treatment, where they have their salaries and their passports hijacked by the Cuban government during their stay. And this is not an issue about like the quality of Cuban doctors. The quality of Cuban doctors and the work they've done in the Caribbean, in Haiti, etc., is great. It's extraordinary. At the end of the day, we have to recognize that, and we want to recognize that. What we are asking, though, is that they not support human trafficking, and that they support, and I know that there's been some effort, particularly starting with Barbados, in order to directly pay these Cuban doctors so that they have a certain amount of freedom of movement and freedom of their professional practice, etc. I mean, we understand, obviously, how the Cuban regime works in maintaining control over these individuals. But we want to basically have a united voice against indentured servitude, against human trafficking, in favor of international labor organization standards, global standards, and international standards for the treatment of workers, regardless of what type of workers they are. So, we're going to continue to take a strong stand against human trafficking, as we have, and President Trump has had across the spectrum. In this regard, we feel that Cuban doctors and the trafficking of them falls within that category. And we look forward to working with mechanisms with our Caribbean neighbors to ensure that they're able to hire directly the doctors, that they feel like doing so on their free will and with their free movement and their freedom of practice and expressions in that regards. And that's an important conversation that will be had and has begun and surely will be raised for the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, when he arrives there in the Caribbean, particularly Jamaica, where it all starts. Another question, along with lines of Francis' question, somebody asked, In addition to Cuban doctors, Caribbean leaders are also concerned about travel, possible travel restrictions that are related to the citizenship by investment. On Friday, they also had an emergency meeting about those proposed tariffs on Chinese linked vessels that they say will increase inflation in the Caribbean region. So I'm wondering, along that lines, do you all have anything specific that you're going to be offering to them in the Caribbean? And then on specifically on Haiti, Port-au-Prince right now is on the verge of a collapse. The gangs were Thomasin 45 within each, just minutes from Petionville. Is there a particular specific plan or a conversation that you all are planning to have to stop this, that you think could help in stopping this onslaught in Haiti? Mr. Clever Caron said, yeah, let me just 3 points here. So, in regards to Cuban doctors in the Caribbean, like I've also previewed and asked and believe, and I've told Caribbean leaders this, that it would be a huge missed opportunity, that with the prevalence, the importance, the preeminence that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and the President, Donald Trump, are giving to the Caribbean, to this third border to literally waste the entire conversation and waste the attention on a discussion of Cuban doctors. Wow. Which is something we should all agree to what we agree and don't agree on, right? Okay. None of us support human trafficking. We all support labor standards, etc. Like that issue, if they choose to overshadow this trip, y'all need to listen. This is SouFLoTV telling you, you need to listen. I will go back to reading again. He said, if they choose to overshadow this trip with the issue of Cuban doctors, it'll be a lost opportunity for the Caribbean. Because, again, the huge opportunity here is energy security, economic development that has plagued this region. And the biggest challenge that we have is Haiti. And so that's a great seg over to Haiti. Yeah, the circumstances dire. We are developing a strategy in order to be able to continue to support the Haitian National Police in order to deal with this. The Secretary is obviously very well aware. It is a strategy in development. I think this trip is also geared to hearing the views of our neighbors and our allies in the Caribbean in order to see what they believe is possible and how they can chip in and how they could work with us in this regard. And I think that this trip is going to add in the urgency of the moment and in the urgency of the situation to the development and implementation of a very targeted strategy in regards to Haiti to try to ensure that these gangs do not take over. Obviously, Port-au-Prince, but that then expands beyond that. That is something that we keep our eyes on every day. We're very focused on, and that the secretary will definitely be looking at to see what opportunities and see what, speaking to the Haitians themselves and the provisional government themselves, but also to others in the region. And so how we work together is this pressing challenge. You mentioned also the citizenship by investment. That's been a long-standing concern we have been obviously on. In some of these islands in the Caribbean, a lot of movement from not only Chinese nationals, but I was waiting for this. Y'all keep listening. You mentioned earlier also the citizenship by investment. That's been a long-standing concern we have seen Obviously, in some of these islands in the Caribbean, a lot of movement from not only the Chinese nationals, but Iranian nationals and other countries that affect not only the national security of the United States, but frankly, that affects the security of these islands as well. That'll be also an issue for a conversation. We want to make sure, like, our goal here is not to impede the development of these islands. Like, we want these islands to be able to have the opportunities. Again, when we talk about inflationary pressures, the biggest inflationary pressure in the Caribbean is energy costs. So that's why we're holistically focused on electricity, on energy cost, on energy security, in order to be able to spread it, because that then spills over into tourism development, etc., etc. So, where we want to be in this place, where some of these islands don't find these citizenship by investment programs, which attract, unfortunately, nefarious actors from China, Iran, and other countries into the Americas, which then becomes a security challenge for all of us. That we don't want that to become. CBI should not be a major, which is citizenship by investment, should not be a major part of these smaller islands' GDP. Wow. So they're going to tell these smaller islands CBI, which is citizenship by investment, should not be a major part of of these smaller islands' GDP. However, we just saw Donald Trump make a gold card for citizenship by investment, and those gold cards are $5 million a piece. And I think they just sold 1,000 of those already. 5 million times 1,000. That's not the goal. And I think that if we work towards increasing the space and reducing some of the pressure to increase their tourism development and other factors through energy, increase energy supply, increase energy distribution, lower their electricity prices, I think at the end of the day, all of those are pluses. They're for these countries not to have to rely on this CBI programs. In other words, the United States of America does not want CBI becoming something big in the Caribbean. Citizenship by investments, because then, according to their argument, it's going to attract nefarious characters from places like China and Iran. And then it will also turn into a security issue for the United States of America, right? Right. Mr. Houston says, great, thank you, thank you. Next, we'll call on Miguel Casio. Miguel, if you can unmute yourself, the floor is yours. And they were having a conversation, which is all printed out on the government site. And Miguel says, question, hi, Mauricio, how are you? Regarding the yesterday announcement about the oil in Venezuela, any nation that allows its company to produce, extract, or export oil from Venezuela will be subjected to a new tariff, and those companies will be subjected to sanctions. Have you had already any response from these Caribbean countries who buy oil from Venezuela, number one? Number two, in Spanish, and Mr. Claver Caron said, so in regards to Venezuela oil purchases, let me just kind of stick to what the point of this trip and of this conversation is. Obviously, with Guyana, we have a great opportunity. And where we're going to be focused is on the security cooperation and how we can flesh out a greater security cooperation agreement with Guyana. Almost akin to what we're working on right now with some of the Gulf states. In that regard, I think that there's a great opportunity for Guyana's development and for the security of Guyana, particularly vis-a-vis the threats that are imposed pardon me, by Venezuela. In other words, what they're saying is Marco Rubio is going to Guyana to offer security against Venezuela in exchange for participation in their huge oil find. I think in regards to Venezuelan exports to islands in the Caribbean, really since the Petro-Carib kind of scheme was kind of like dismantled on its own to a degree and obviously pushed over, particularly after President Trump's 2019 maximum pressure policy, I think we've seen that really truly diminish. Now, what we will still do see is 45,000 barrels or so per day moving towards Cuba, but that's at no cost and no income to the regime, to Venezuela. That obviously costs them money, and that's a whole different conversation there. Y'all see, there's a lot of moving parts in this conversation, people. What we seek, frankly, they said, and I think that we have an opportunity here, is in regards to energy security and why the Secretary Marco Rubio focuses on this trip to Guyana and Suriname, is really like these countries aren't going to be dependent anymore. It's really for the countries in the Caribbean to not have to be dependent on Venezuelan oil, and then the schemes and extortions that came from that, from Petro-Carib, et cetera, in the past. So to be able to have Caribbean countries, their own CARICOM brethren, right? To be able to help create that energy security, that those needs were seen by other countries outside, including the Dominican Republic, also looking to create deals with Guyana in regards to the refining, etc., of oil for their energy needs, which has also been an Achilles for the Dominican Republic. So this is really, truly a unique historic opportunity for energy security in the Caribbean. We're deeply committed to that. The fact that these CARICOM nations, that Guyana and Suriname, and then obviously on the natural gas front, kind of in the revitalization of however we can help in Trinidad, that in that regard are really unique opportunities here. And that's what we really need to be focused on, because we don't want to have a rekindling of the past, of all the troubles and issues that the dependency on Venezuela brought to the islands of the Caribbean. So in other words, what SouFLoTV is getting out of this so far is that this great oil find in Guyana, the United States of America feels like they can market that oil from Guyana, give them all the tools they need to refine the oil, to sell, transport, everything, and offer them security. So Guyana would become the main oil supplier in this region, and they would lock off Venezuela and not use oil from Venezuela anymore. So Venezuela would have lots of oil, but no market for their oil. 45,000 barrels a day going to Cuba, but no money is being made there. He went on to say, great, fantastic. Actually, I'm sorry. Let me add one more thing, he said. Just think about also how the world has changed in such a short period of time. And I mean, the fact that today we're sitting here talking about it, the first Trump administration, I recall that one of the challenges that we always had was what really dominated the conversation with the Caribbean was Venezuela. And in that regard, because of the extortions that the Venezuelan regime had over these Caribbean islands, or these islands in the Caribbean. So the fact that today, in these encroachments by Venezuela and the Venezuelan government on the sovereignty and the territorial sovereignty of Guyana, the fact that the Caribbean stands in one voice with its Caribbean partner, with its fellow Caribbean nation in Guyana in this regard, against those threats from Venezuela, like, that's pretty extraordinary. The world has changed quite a bit in that regard. And that's a great opportunity. And obviously, we want to make sure that Guyana has the security necessary to be able to continue its historic path in the development of its energy industry so that we can also help its Caribbean partners be able to also benefit from that. Ms. Houston says, great, fantastic, Mauricio. And to spokesperson Bruce, we're actually really coming to the end of this question and answer session. And it's been a fantastic conversation, and we really appreciate everyone's interest in this trip that Secretary of State Marco Rubio is about to take to the Caribbean, starting off with Jamaica. I know we will hear more from the Secretary and those traveling. It's wonderful to have you all here. Thank you again. To our panelists, looking forward to this great trip. Please do, on behalf of the State Department, remember that this is an on-the-record call. Information may be attributed to the speakers by name and title. At this point, this concludes our on-the-record call. The embargo is lifted, and we look forward to remaining in touch in days to come. Thank you very much. This piece of work I just read to you is on the record briefing on Secretary of State Marco Rubio's travel to Jamaica, Guyana, and Suriname. Tammy Bruce is the department spokesperson. Mauricio Clever Caron is the U.S. Special Envoy for Latin America. And they just had this conversation about what this trip that Secretary of State Marco Rubio is about to embark on will entail. I don't think it gets any more detailed and any more transparent than this. Many people of high ranking think that this is all a facade, and the real reason that they're going there has to do with Cuba. But given all the information I've seen in here, like the strategic placing of China and like they not wanting the Caribbean islands to have citizenship by investment programs, because then that will open it up for nefarious characters out of China and Iran and other places to come plant themselves right in America's backyard, which would then become a security issue. There are other things in here that I think the conversation when he arrives in Jamaica will bring up. But what I do understand from going through these words that were exchanged is this. The United States of America has, for sure, under Marco Rubio, labeled the use of Cuban doctors and the Cuban doctor or Cuban medical program as human trafficking. And they're going to word it as anybody who is supporting it, involved in it, are partaking in human trafficking. So right when you hear him say, I hope when the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, gets to Jamaica, gets to the Caribbean, that they do not overshadow the conversation with about Cuba. We should already all be firm on that we are all against human trafficking. So let's move on to another topic. We have bigger things to do in Haiti. That's a bigger problem. That right there, I think is going to be a problem. Or maybe not. Jamaica's relationship with Cuba is going to be one of the main concerns here. Jamaica's relationship with China is going to be one of the main parts here. And Jamaica's relationship with Mexico is going to be one of the main parts here. And this is me, SouFLoTV, saying this to my audience. Here is why. And this is how we're going to close this video out. Okay? Pay attention to this. So, Jamaica's relationship with Cuba. Marco Rubio's personal axe to grind, being himself of Cuban descent, and he does not like the regime that's in Cuba, the leaders that are in Cuba, and he wants to topple that regime. The Cuban medical program, exporting their doctors and nurses, brings in more money than Jamaica brings in their GDP annually. So Cuba is really banking a whole lot of money, and this money is being used in Cuba, according to Marco Rubio, to fuel a regime that he does not like. So the conversation is going to be about Cuba. The conversation is going to be about China, because China is heavily invested in Jamaica. And just like they said, this citizenship by investment, or CBI program, will open up for nefarious characters from China and Iran. Those specific two were listed among other people who could be enemies of the United States of America, would enable these people who are enemies of the US or anti-American to plant themselves right in America's backyard and strategically build points in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean where they can strike the United States of America from. And then for Mexico, it has to be a conversation about Mexico. Mexico controls Jamaica's airports and Jamaica's wharfs. Mexico and Chinese people. So Jamaica's airports and wharfs, where the ships dock, where the containers come in, where the planes take off and land, custom agents, free flow of drugs, cocaine, fentanyl, heroin, human trafficking through the Caribbean diaspora into the United States of America. That has to be another heavy concern, because wherever there's human trafficking, there will also be not just victims who are being trafficked. That can also be a tunnel for unscrupulous characters to make their way, along with these illicit drugs, into the United States of America, where they can do great damage. Wrap your mind around this. Shout out to the people who are not short attention span, who will listen to this and understand what's taking place. And I will leave this video here again. On the record briefing on Secretary of State Marco Rubio's travel to Jamaica, Guyana, and Suriname. The reason for his travel. This was a special briefing that was made transparent to the public. Tammy Bruce, department spokesperson, and Mauricio Clever Caron, U.S. Special Envoy for Latin America, were on this via a teleconference, and it was printed out for all of us. All right? There's a part there where I might have missed, where Miss Houston says, "Greetings, everyone, and welcome." And that's the whole greeting part that I skipped over. It is my honor to serve as the mediator for today's On the Record call, where we will be previewing the Secretary's travel to Jamaica, Guyana, and Suriname. Joining us, our Department of State spokesperson, Tammy Bruce, and U.S. Special Envoy of Latin America, Mauricio Clever Caron. And then she said, "Before we begin, let's go over the ground rules and all that other stuff." Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Welcome aboard, everybody. And then they went off into the conversation. And I brought that all to you. Leave your comments in the comment section below. I'll catch you on the next video. It's SouFLoTV. I'm out. Peace.